Hello one and all and welcome to Between the Lines. Today I bring to you the Kim Kardashian of all the mummies. The one and only, wait for it, King Tutankhamun. We will all show him some love and call him King Tut. Before I begin, let me just tell you that King Tut is one of the most popular mummies in the world. And the reason for that is that he was the last heir of one of the most powerful dynasty of Egypt. And his death was the death rattle of that dynasty, bringing it to a complete end. Discovering Tut, the saga continues, is a lesson that is going to give you an insight into the life and times of one of the most powerful pharaoh of Egypt, and that is King Tut. The whole lesson revolves around unveiling the mystery that surrounds his life and death. In this lesson, I'm going to give you a complete summary of the entire research that was done on King Tut and his life. We are going to try and unveil the reason for his mysterious death. We will talk about all the themes that are raised by this lesson, and we will also discuss his family line, his wacky grandparent, and a little bit about the ancient Egyptian culture. So let's get started. The lesson begins at 6 p.m. on 5th January 2005, where the mummy of King Tut was being very quietly and very carefully transferred into a CT machine that was brought to his resting place. That is the place that he was buried. Now, the aim of this CT scan was to probe and reveal the medical mysteries that surrounded the death of this boy king who died 3,300 years ago. Like most Egyptian pharaohs, he was mummified and buried in the Valley of the Kings. When the mummy of King Tut was being made to go through a CT scan, thousands of tourists had come to his resting place. Some of them just wanted to pay their tribute to the most famous mummy in the world, while others just wanted to gaze at the gold-plated or the gilded tomb of the mummy, which was also buried with one of the largest treasure ever found. What did not skip the mind of these curious tourists was the superstitious belief of the curse of the pharaoh. That is, the ancient Egyptian belief that anyone who disturbs the restful sleep of a mummy would be cursed with misfortune, which means bad luck or even death. Now that's one scary mummy to meddle with. Now some would say that this was just a superstitious belief that was propagated just so that no one tries to dig up old mummies for treasure or try to disturb their restful sleep. However, if you go on and try to do a little research about the number of conspiracies and theories that surround the whole research process where Tut was discovered, then you might start believing this curse yourself. Since this video is purely educational, I'm not going to go into the details of all these conspiracies because right now I want to cover the lesson, but I promise you that I'm going to make a separate video talking about all these very interesting things that happened during the time of Tut's discovery. Now, in the next scene in the lesson, we see a bunch of sad archaeologists who are not happy with the way King Tut was handled in 1922, which was the time that he was first found by the British archaeologist Howard Carter. So basically, Howard Carter was the first person who had discovered King Tut's mummy after futile research that he had done for years. The contents found near Tut's mummy remain one of the richest royal collection ever found, and they mostly had artifacts in gold. Ancient Egyptians, like most ancient people, believed in the concept of Punarjanam, or what we call the concept of afterlife. And it was because of this reason that Tut was buried with a lot of everyday items that he may need in his afterlife, such as board games, a bronze razor, linen, cases of food and wine, and definitely the most important, undergarments. It took Howard Carter months just to make a detailed list of all the items he had found with Tut's mummy. And once done with that, he started investigating the 3 coffins that were there with him. He found a shroud and a garland of flowers that gave him an indication that probably this burial happened in the month of April or May, since it is during that time that these plants grow. The biggest problem Carter faced was the problem of removing Tut's mummy from the golden coffin. During the rituals of an ancient Egyptian funeral, there is this thing called a resin which is used, which is like a very sticky liquid, and all that ritual resin had cemented Tut's body to the bottom of the gold coffin, and thus it was impossible for Carter to remove the mummy unless he used force. The first thing he tried was he left the mummy out there sunbathing in the blazing sun, which in Egypt can beat down on you like a hammer. But when even that did not work, he finally had to chisel the mummy away because he was left with no other option, and because of that he caused a lot of damage to the mummy. It was this act of Howard Carter that brought a lot of criticism from the present day archaeologists, and by that I mean the archaeologists who are taking Tut for a CT scan, as his act had damaged the mummy and severed nearly every major joint. So it was very difficult for the researchers to determine whether the damage to the mummy was caused before Tut's death or was it a result of Carter's research. However, in Carter's defense, we have to realize that if he had not used force and not chiseled away the mummy from the golden coffin, then thieves would have got passed through the guards and they would have literally ripped the mummy apart in order to get the gold artifacts. Another important aspect that the lesson covers is how archaeology has changed over the decades. Earlier, and by earlier I mean in the past, the focus of archaeology was on finding treasure. But now, in the present day scenario, we use very sophisticated technology, tools, equipment. We rely on cutting edge technological systems in order to do our research, so that our focus is entirely on gathering information, preserving these items in their most pristine way, and that focus has definitely shifted from finding treasure. Now, there were two main reasons for putting Tut into a CT machine. One, to find out how did he die. Two, to find out how old was he at the time of his death. In 1968, an anatomy professor had x-rayed Tut's mummy, and he was shocked to find that his front ribs and breastbone were missing. Now, such a revelation or a discovery would not have been possible without technological precision. And this revelation gives us a clue that in all likelihood, King Tut did not die a natural death. Tut's mummy was scanned in 2005 under the supervision of Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities. The computed tomography scan, or what we call the CT scan, could not reveal the mystery of King Tut's death, but it did give us a lot of clues for sure. Now we've come to that part of the lesson where I have to tell you a little bit about Tuts family line and his crazy granddad. We start with Amenhotep III. We are not sure whether this king was Tut's father or grandfather or just the villain in The Mummy. On a serious note, Amenhotep III was a powerful pharaoh who ruled for almost 4 decades at the height of the 18th dynasty's golden age. Basically, he was a good king who did all nice things for his kingdom, all except one. He gave birth to his son, Amenhotep IV. His son, Amenhotep IV, succeeded him, and his rule brought one of the strangest period in the history of ancient Egypt. Here's a list of all the weird things Amenhotep IV did. Amenhotep IV promoted the worship of Aten, which means the sun disk. And he was not simply satisfied by doing this much, so he changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, which means servant of the Aten. The next silly thing that our Egyptian version of Tughlaq did was that he changed the capital from the old religious city of Thebes to the new city of Akhenaten, which is now known as Amarna. The biggest shocker that Amenhotep IV or Akhenaten gave his kingdom was by attacking the idols of Amun, a major god in Egypt. He went to the extent of smashing its idols and closing down temples. Now, this must have been a very violent and horrific time in ancient Egypt, because whenever the religious sentiment of any community are attacked, then it creates the worst kind of rebellion where so many lives are lost in this whole process of religious fanaticism. This also makes you realize that not much has changed since the time of the mummies. To sum up the rule of Akhenaten, Ray Johnson has very sophisticatedly said that the family that had ruled for centuries was coming to an end, and then Akhenaten went a little wacky. After this, a very mysterious ruler that no one knows much about came to the throne, and his name was Smenkhre. Finally, after him, it was our own boy king, Tutankhamun, or as he was named at the time, Tutankhaten, who came to the throne. The boy king, though young, was still wise, as he saw the restoration of the old ways. That is, he undid everything that his crazy uncle/father/grandfather had done. The boy king soon changed his name to Tutankhamun, which means the living image of Amun, the god that Akhenaten had attacked, and personally saw the restoration of olden ways. King Tut reigned for 9 years and then died very unexpectedly. Now, after reading this lesson, you might feel that King Tut is the only mummy out there, but the fact is that the Egyptian Mummy Project did an inventory of mummies in 2003, and they recorded somewhere around 600 mummies, and that was when they were still counting. So it's fair to say that Tut is just one amongst many mummies in Egypt. On the night of the scan, workmen carried Tut from the tomb in his box. They climbed a ramp and a flight of stairs into the swirling sand outside. Then they rose on a hydraulic lift into a trailer, and this trailer held the scanner. Initially, there was some problem with the scan because of some sand that was caught in the cooler fans, but this problem was solved within 20 minutes with a pair of white plastic fans. The witty guard actually uses this opportunity to crack a joke and say that this is also because of the curse of the pharaoh, implying that it was the supernatural elements that were punishing them for disturbing the restful sleep of the pharaoh. Finally, the technicians scanned the mummy from head to toe. 1700 digital X-ray images in cross-section were created. Tut's head was scanned in 0.62 millimeter slices to register its complicated structures, and thus the entire body was similarly recorded. Finally, a team of specialists in radiology, forensics, and anatomy began to probe the secrets. A technician displayed astonishing images of Tut on a computer screen. A grey head took shape from a scattering of pixels. As the scan was finally complete, and Zahi Hawass was smiling as he was so stressed about the whole scan. He actually could not sleep at all the previous night because he was so stressed about everything going perfectly all right. You have to understand that when you're handling one of the most important subject in the field of archaeology, a lot of responsibility lies on your shoulder to make sure that everything goes fine. So Zahi Hawass was finally relieved to see that nothing had gone wrong. Just above the entrance to Tut's tomb, the place where he was again put to rest, stood Orion. Orion is a constellation that ancient Egyptians believed to be the soul of Osiris. Osiris being the god of afterlife. I think this sentence has been used in the lesson just to give a kind of a dreamy and poetic ending to the lesson, implying that the constellation Orion, symbolic of the god of afterlife, itself was watching over the boy king. I'm going to do a very quick discussion on the themes of this lesson. Number 1, an insight into ancient Egyptian culture. Discovering Tut provides us comprehensive details about the beliefs and values of ancient Egyptians as we get to know about their thoughts on afterlife, and also their conviction that Tut would be resurrected one day, which is why they had buried him with so much gold and everyday items. We also get to know about their family line, about the powerful rulers during Tut's time, and how this was one of the most powerful dynasty of Egypt. Number 2, understanding revolutions in the field of archaeology. This story helps us to understand the many revolutions that have taken place in the field of archaeology thanks to the modern sophisticated technology and tools. The lesson also highlights an important shift in archaeology, which was earlier on finding treasure and has now shifted to gaining knowledge and unveiling mysteries. I'm going to end this tutorial by bringing your attention to one line in the lesson that personally impressed me a lot, and that is, King Tut is one of the first mummies to be scanned in death as in life, moving regally ahead of his countrymen. You have to understand that King Tut was a prominent figure even when he was alive as a boy king, as he took bold decisions and maintained his rule for 9 long years. Like other pharaohs, his fame and popularity did not come to an end with his death, as just as the boy king was a leading figure while alive, he remained so even in his death by being the first mummy to undergo a CT scan, which means being the first person from the past who came in contact with such advanced technology even after his death. On one hand, Tut represents the past by providing a link to the very ancient tales of old Egypt. On the other hand, he represents the most futuristic technology by undergoing a CT scan. So that's it for today. If there's any part of the lesson that you did not understand and want me to describe in detail, please mention it in the comments below, and still watch out for the next video, especially the one that I'm going to do on the conspiracy theories revolving around the curse of the pharaoh, which will be coming out shortly. Till then, take care and keep reading.